How's it going, everyone? Solid before Mother SpongeBob. Today is September 22nd, 2021, and today we're going to focus on this tropical wave that will likely become Tropical Storm Sam in the very near future and potentially Hurricane Sam in the later future. And we'll also talk about this next disturbance, which has more likely of a chance to develop into Tropical Storm Teresa later during the week. Well, before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather content. So take a look at the current 5-day tropical weather outlook. We of course have Tropical Depression Peter as well as Tropical Depression Rose at this time. However, they're very weak and don't have much of a chance. So Peter and Tropical Depression Rose are not much of a worry anymore. However, we of course have this tropical disturbance, which will likely become Tropical Storm Sam, as now the National Hurricane Center is giving this a 100% chance of formation within the next 48 hours, and of course within the next 5 days also a 100% chance. So this will likely become Tropical Storm Sam in the very near future. And we also have this other disturbance in the middle of the Atlantic, which has more likely than not of a chance of developing into Tropical Storm Teresa in the very near future. However, it isn't an immediate impact to land, or it isn't forecast to be to have any sort of impact to land, so it's not much of a worry there. So we're going to focus on this tropical wave, which will likely become Tropical Storm Sam in the future. Taking a look at the current satellite imagery, we're beginning to see a lot more convection now than there was before, because before the circulation was very broad with a lot of dry air, but now we're seeing that convection focus in on one area, which is what is required for a tropical wave to attain tropical storm status. We need that convection to occur right around to create a lower air pressure area along the surface, and that's exactly what's happening right now. And you see that it's under a very moist environment at this time. We don't see the darker black contours outside of the one that's all the way to the top left of the corner, but it's still very far from this storm, probably a couple hundred miles away from this storm, so it isn't doing much of anything there. And we see that there's a nice outflow with this, so there isn't a ton of wind shear right now. There is a little bit of an upper level high to the north of it, but it's mainly bringing weak wind shear, and the upper level winds are going the same direction as the lower level winds, so the wind shear overall isn't as strong for this storm. So it's pretty much inevitable this will eventually develop into a tropical storm. We just need to see a little bit more convection within the center circulation, which is expected to happen under this lightly sheared environment, as well as a very moist environment, where we do see where it will allow for that center circulation to attain its max speed with the amount of convection that's going on. Now, taking a look at the sea surface temperature ahead of it, the storm is located right around this area, and you see that it's over sea surface temperatures that are more than warm enough to support for tropical cyclone development. Typically, you need at least around 26 degrees Celsius or more for a tropical cyclone to develop. And you see that right now the storm is right over 27 degrees Celsius water, and it's going to move into 28 and potentially eventually 29 degrees Celsius water in the future, which is equivalent to the low to mid 80 degree waters in terms of Fahrenheit. So this should certainly fuel the storm as it moves forward. So the sea surface temperatures won't be a worry regarding the development in this storm in the future, as it's going to be just over very warm waters, and it's going to avoid the influence of this North Atlantic current that brings cooler waters further southward. So as a result, sea surface temperature shouldn't be a worry for Tropical Storm Sam at all. Now, take a look at the wind shear map over the next several days, because it's going to be very important to determine if this does have a shot of developing a lot more than what it is, and if it does have a shot to develop into a hurricane. You see that the wind shear is going to be very light. We might see a little bit of an upper level high develop over this low pressure system, but that should actually help the storm a little bit, because it'll allow the storm to release a lot of outflow with the upper level high in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And of course, high pressure systems divert air away from the center rather than converge air in the center. So as a result of this upper level high, it should create a nice outflow channel for a lot of the convection that produces a lot of that brings up a lot of that air and latent heat up into the atmosphere. So as a result, this upper level high should actually enhance its development. And you see the GFS model does agree with that, as the GFS model brings us down to a 974 millibar hurricane, which is equivalent to a category 2 or category 3 hurricane, which means that we could see a major hurricane in our hands as early as Monday, or maybe even earlier than that, as it seems like all the computer models are leaning towards developing this into potentially Hurricane Sam in the very near future. So that's definitely something you guys want to keep in mind, and at least be aware of this storm in the Caribbean, because it could come uncomfortably close to you guys. Even if it doesn't directly hit, you still could get impacted by strong waves and a high rip current risk. So at least be aware of the storm in the Caribbean islands, and there's still a good possibility it could come close and even directly impact you guys. But you see the wind shear will be very light for this storm as it heads further westward. On the upper level, while there will be an upper level high over this storm, it's going to be directly over this storm, so it won't feel a lot of the influence of the wind shear, and the upper level high should enhance the outflow within the upper levels of this storm, which will definitely help this storm develop a lot. Now, in terms of the relative humidity, that's what I said in my last video, that might have been the main obstacle for the storm as it heads further westward. However, now the GFS model is leaning more towards the dry air not doing much of anything to this storm, as it really does strengthen it as it heads further westward. You see, while there is going to be a decent amount of dry air, but as it's approaching the Caribbean or very close to the Caribbean, the storm will sort of be in a small circulation, and it will sort of be in an area where the moisture will it's going to be in a very moist environment, and it should be closed off enough from this dry air and have a circulation small enough to not really entrain much of the dry air around it, as it should sort of create its own little bubble where it is only where it is pretty much trapped in the moisture it's producing, and that dry air isn't really entraining the circulation. So dry air should be the problem, and it seems like all the main computer models are leaning towards developing this potentially into a hurricane and maybe a major hurricane. So I'd say a hurricane at this point, a Hurricane Sam is more likely than not based off of the trends we've been seeing with the computer models. Now, taking a look now at the track forecast, the GFS model is stating the good news is that the GFS model is still lenient on taking this northward and eventually out to sea, not really directly impacting land at all. But there's still a lot of days to go, and that's definitely something I want to reiterate, especially since the European wants to take this directly to the Caribbean. So you see the main steering flow of the storm will be that ridge just to the north of it. However, this storm is going to move very slowly to the west, as it's going to take almost a week for it to reach the Caribbean, which for a lot of you guys, or for those who know the weather, it typically takes a lot quicker than a week for where Tropical Storm Sam is located right now and to reach the Caribbean. But since Tropical Storm Rose is currently in this area, it's pretty much weakening the ridging in this area, so there isn't a strong defined ridge that's really steering this storm all the way to the west, bringing those strong lower level winds to steer the storm west very fast. As you see that since Tropical Depression Rose is here, there isn't really a strong ridge in this region, and as a result, it has a weak Tropical Storm Sam, or will likely become Tropical Storm Sam, has a weak steering flow, and it's going to move very slowly to the west. And it might not be until right around a week from now, the 6-day mark, where the ridging does begin to form and accelerate. However, by that time, it might be too late for this storm to just move, to just stay southward, because typically for slow-moving storms in the main Devon region, it's very hard to make it all the way to land without being interfered by maybe an upper-level trough to steer this out to sea, because since it's going to be over the main Devon region for so long, there's only so much time it could stay in this region before something sweeps it up on north. There are certainly tropical cyclones that have reached land going this slowly. One big example is Hurricane Irma back in 2017, which made its way all through the Caribbean and eventually Florida, of course, and it was moving very slowly in the main Devon region. But more likely for slower storms, they just typically get swept away out to sea, because they move so slowly that there's only so much time it could stay this far south before a low pressure system or a jet stream dip just sweeps it out to sea. So that's definitely good news if that were to happen. However, the European model is leaning more towards taking this further southward and eventually impacting the Caribbean, because if we were to move forward with what the European model is saying at this point, you're going to see that the European model wants to take this further westward, bringing it closer to the Caribbean, and it expects just enough ridging in this region to keep this southward and eventually impact the Caribbean. And if it stays this far southward, there's a better chance that we're going to see this storm move all the way west and potentially come close to the east coast of the United States. Right now, currently the European model is updating as we speak right now. Before, it was taking a track that was headed towards Hispaniola, but now we're seeing a similar track, I'd say, but the European model still wants to take this southward, and if it were to stay this far southward back Caribbean, there's more likely of a shot this could reach the east coast. So there's a lot of factors we need to pay attention to. We need to pay attention to how strong the ridging will be, because that will certainly be huge in determining the track of this. Currently, both the computer models seem to have big disagreements regarding the track forecast. The European wants to take this southward and further westward, while the GFS model is more leaning towards bringing this northward. I can't say for certain which is more likely right now, but we just need to pay close attention, especially in the Caribbean, because you guys could potentially see a hurricane in your hands. And if this were to reach the Caribbean, there's more likely of a shot this could maybe eventually reach the US. So we just need to wait and see. But however, the thing that the computer models aren't really disagreeing upon is the strength of this. They're both expecting this to strengthen into potentially major hurricane. So I'd say a hurricane is more likely than not at this point, but I'll make sure to update you guys as we get more updates. In terms of the model tracking guidance, you see that they're all taking it westward, and it's too early to say if it'll exactly impact the Caribbean, but they're more lenient on bringing it a little bit more northward. But it's too early to say if this means that this will go out to sea or impact the Caribbean. Really all depends on the ridging in the middle of the Atlantic, and I'll make sure to update you guys as we get more updates on the computer models. And taking a look at the model intensity guidance, you see a vast majority at this time of the computer models are forecasting this to reach at least hurricane status, and some bringing it even to major hurricane status. And this is definitely worrying, because typically the model intensity guidance, the ensemble members typically bring a lot weaker of the storm than the actual result. So the fact that they're all bringing it at least around category 1 to category 2 status means that there's more of a possibility we could see potentially a major hurricane by next week. So that's certainly something we need to keep in mind. Now, in terms of my track forecast for potential Hurricane Sam, I'm expecting it to move west-northwestward and could come very close to the Caribbean. There's still that possibility that this moves out to sea and doesn't really directly impact anyone. And there's still an equal possibility it stays further southward and impacts the Caribbean. So this track forecast is very uncertain at this time, but I'll make sure to update you guys once we get more certainty. But I'd say for the Caribbean, at least be aware of this, because we could see potentially a major hurricane come uncomfortably close to you guys. Really all depends on this ridging over the next several days. Now, taking a look at this other tropical storm, it's Tropical Storm Teresa. It's likely to form at this point, as there's a 60% chance of development. However, it isn't expected to impact land anytime soon, and potentially most likely won't ever impact land, so it isn't much of a worry about. But I just want to point out that we could see Tropical Storm Teresa in the near future. But yeah, guys, I guess that's it for this video. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather content. And I hope you guys have a good day.